Good evening, comrades and friends. I want to dedicate this talk to Berta Cáceres, a leader of indigenous people and an environmentalist known worldwide who was assassinated by Honduran death squads, government death squads, last Thursday, a week ago. Roe v. Wade's case in 1973 was pivotal in the struggle for women's reproductive rights. Then the Supreme Court legalized the right to privacy, i.e. abortion. That decision resulted from a massive women's movement pressuring for that right for years. It did not just happen because the justices were nice guys, far from it. In fact, the vote was 7-2. 5 of the 7 who voted for choice were appointed by Republican presidents. So why was the decision favorable to women? Because of the mass struggle, the millions of women who fought for their rights. Women fought to demand the right to decide for themselves when or whether to have children, and who sought safe legal abortions as part of necessary health care, which it is. Above all, we should see this as a fight for women's right for all health care. Abortions before Roe v. Wade were allowed in 17 or so states, and therapeutic abortions could happen in New York City, although there were many obstacles to getting them. Legalization then meant that abortions already happening at about 1 million a year could be obtained in sterile, medically safe circumstances without fearing the arrest of the medical staff or the facility provider. Since Roe was decided and abortion legalized, the death rate from abortion has plummeted and is rare. Joining in this fight were healthcare professionals who were sick and tired of seeing women struggle to find underground abortion providers and suffer from complications, infections, even death from non-sterile, what was called back alley abortions, mostly without anesthesia or painkillers. And women did resort to self-induced abortions with the infamous knitting needles, coat hangers, and chemicals. For example, Bellevue Hospital from 1940 to 1954 hospitalized 7,000 women for abortion complications. Before Roe v. Wade, affluent women could obtain abortions in hospitals or fly to countries with legal abortions, such as Sweden or later England. It was low-income women, oppressed, students and youth and young mothers who resorted to unsafe procedures and faced complications. In the early 1970s, even before Roe v. Wade, the CDC estimated that the mortality rate for women of color was 12 times higher than for white women, showing that safe procedures were still unobtainable for many women. Abortion is a part of women's health care. It and birth control are necessities. Worldwide, now, women have 44 million abortions, many of them unsafe. 22,500 to 44,000 die, mostly in poor countries, oppressed by imperialism, and where the procedure is illegal. In Latin America, where abortion is mainly illegal, 95% of abortions were unsafe in 2008. The Catholic Church interferes, of course, even denying abortions to children who are rape victims and to pregnant women now who are sickened by the Zika virus, whose fetuses are endangered. Yet in socialist Cuba, abortion is legal and safe. Women from throughout Latin America fly to Cuba to get the procedure. For those of us who are experienced in this struggle, we remember heartbreaking stories of friends. One I'm going to tell. A coworker of mine years ago was a UC Berkeley student in the 1960s. She decided to have an abortion. She was taken blindfolded in a car with 4 men she didn't know across state lines to get an abortion in Nevada, and then driven back to California the same way. College friends didn't know where to turn. Many got complications and later could not have healthy pregnancies. This happened to a relative of mine. We sadly remember heartbreaking signs at pro-choice events saying, "My mother died from a botched abortion held by children, teenagers, or adults." There's nothing like seeing a sign like that. We should laud, however, the doctors and the midwives who provided abortions underground at that time. These courageous medical professionals were motivated out of compassion and risked their medical licenses to do it. We commend Dr. Kenneth Edelin, an African-American doctor in Boston, who was prosecuted for performing a legal abortion on a desperate teenager. Our party members joined in his national defense movement, particularly mentioning our comrade Phoebe in Boston, and his conviction was overturned. Once Roe v. Wade became the law of the land and safe legal abortion was lawfully guaranteed, the right wing sharpened their cudgels and began devising every maneuver they could to weaken and overturn this right. They have done this legally through legislation and extra-legally through violence, even murder. In 1976, the Reactionary Hyde Amendment was passed by Congress. It denied Medicaid funding for abortions. Then, Democratic President Jimmy Carter signed it, and when told it was unfair to poor women, he said, "Life isn't fair." And this from a Democrat. Since 1995, 876 U.S. anti-choice laws have been enacted. Many of this legislation makes access to this legal medical procedure near to impossible. Extreme anti-choice, anti-woman, anti-poor, and racist rhetoric by politicians and right-wing media fuels the far-right wing's violence. Clinics have been hit by arson and bombs, windows broken, clinics destroyed. Clinic staff has been stalked and wanted posters of them put up. Their children have been followed and terrorized. 52% of clinics have been terrorized. Planned Parenthood, as you know, has been a particular target and been vilified, and attacks on its clinics increased after a vile, untrue video surfaced made by anti-choice elements blaming the organizations for false crimes. Why is this organization a target of the ultra-right? For what? Providing basic health care to millions of low-income women. On November 27th, a rabid anti-woman gunman fatally shot 3 people at a Colorado Planned Parenthood. 2 of them were with women patients. One man, and I saw his partner on TV last week, one man had come with his partner who was pregnant and had come for prenatal care. He was killed. We sent a donation and a message of solidarity to the Planned Parenthood clinic. This month is the 1-year anniversary of the destruction of All Families Health Care in Kalispell, Montana. The owner, Susan Cahill, has not been able to reopen it. She has been out of work since, and the area residents are without a medical clinic. We wrote about this attack and we contacted her to show solidarity. And many other clinics have been closed due to restrictive legislation or to violence. The ultra-right, frustrated that anti-abortion legislation wasn't doing the job fast enough, has resorted to violence, even murder of 12 people in the last 20 years, including Doctors Gunn, Tiller, and Slapian. 87% of U.S. counties have no abortion facilities. Many women, including many poor women, have to travel far distances, find places to stay, lose days of school or work, and get child care. Many lack funds to do this. Most medical schools don't teach the procedure, and many doctors are afraid to perform it for fear of retaliation against themselves and their children by domestic terrorists, the real domestic terrorists. The anti-choice right wing will not stop, and there are threats to clinics and staff in every state meant to frighten providers into closing the clinics. The Texas law could close 3/4 of all abortion facilities by putting onerous and expensive requirements on every clinic, making it impossible for many to remain open. It requires doctors to affiliate with nearby hospitals and limits abortions to ambulatory surgery centers. This is absurd. Who in this room has not had a medical procedure in a doctor's office without having to go to a surgical center? As for the admitting privileges rule, it's a non-problem. It never happened. In the rare circumstances when complications occur, they usually occur later on when women are at home and they have to go to get medical help near their homes. The state is lying when it claims the law improves women's health, because it has only created hardships for women. Many women in Texas are already resorting to self-induced abortions or have to travel far, even out of state, to get the procedure, which is expensive. Many cannot leave their jobs, schools, or children to do that and do not have the money. For Latinas, and this is very important, we have to say this in our paper a lot, there are many undocumented women living in southern and southwest Texas. There are border checkpoints along about 60 miles in from the border in the south and the southwest. And since there's only one and maybe two clinics left in that area, if they have to, but they can't fulfill the need. Women cannot, the undocumented cannot drive north to go to another clinic, because if they do, they'll be stopped, possibly detained, deported, and lose custody of their children. We have to make sure we raise this in all our articles. This is the first major abortion case at the Supreme Court in 25 years. The legal issue is, does the law put an undue burden on women's access to abortion? If the law in Texas is upheld, there will again be a two-tier system. Affluent women can go elsewhere in the state or go out of state or go out of the country. Low-income women won't have options, and more will resort to desperate measures. Women's clinics brought the state case against Texas. They were represented by the Center for Reproductive Rights, which argued it at the Supreme Court on March 2nd. The center says the Texas law creates obstacles to abortion access and has led to closure of more than half of the state's 40 clinics, and that if it is fully implemented, it would leave 10 clinics in a state with 5 million women of childbearing age. And read Sue's article. It gives all the details about the Texas case. If there's a bad ruling, it can impact women in 9 other states which have similar laws ready to go and could close dozens of clinics, implementation of other restrictive laws around the U.S. Some states already have only one clinic. There's a hero, Dr. Willie Parker. He's in Mississippi, and the only clinic that exists. And young women have to go through a gauntlet of right-wingers to get in the door. Some states already have one doctor or one clinic. 23 states filed briefs on the side of Texas, the reactionary side. It is a turning point, said the Center for Reproductive Rights, and could affect laws intended to close clinics. Hundreds of amicus briefs, though, were filed for women's rights, including by lawyers, judges, and celebrities who have had abortions and were willing to go public with that information because of this, how much this fight really means to millions of women. So a lot of, women you would never expect did write affidavits to that effect. Women's groups are fighting back. The majority of the U.S. population supports keeping abortion legal. A good sign is that thousands of women in a multinational grouping rallied outside the Supreme Court on March 2nd when Whole Women's Health v. Hellerstedt was heard. They were of all ages and nationalities and from around the country. They far outnumbered the pathetic showing of the ultra-right by at least 10 to 1. This bodes very well for the future. The attack on women's rights is part of the capitalist ruling class's offensive against workers' voting rights, especially hitting people of oppressed nationalities and hitting immigrants. It is the crudest right-wing politicians who espouse anti-woman rhetoric, along with racism, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ, and anti-worker slanders. The same state legislatures that restrict abortion rights also attack same-sex marriage, limit voting rights, especially for people of color, push back affirmative action, undo public sector union rights, object to raising the minimum wage, and refuse to expand Medicaid for poorer workers. Defending women's rights to all reproductive and medical care, jobs with a livable wage, unionization, child care, quality housing, and adequate healthy food for their families all go together. It's part of the struggle to wrench gains and rights from the capitalist state and the ruling class, and part of the political struggle against right-wing bigotry against women, especially the oppressed. I want to say something about our party's history on these issues. Our party and our activist wing years ago in the 70s, Youth Against War and Fascism, has always had a large overview of the abortion issue and see it as part of the overall struggle for women's rights. We were involved in the struggle for women's right to safe legal abortion, but we also were in this struggle to stop government and hospital-forced sterilization of low-income women and women of color, including recipients of public assistance. We also oppose coerced abortions of women, whether by employers or local governments or partners, or discrimination against workers based on pregnancy. And I will say, Michael Bloomberg's company was sued by 84 women who apparently were pressured not to have children and not to go on maternity leave, and many, when they left their jobs, which were at higher level, came back and were put in at entry-level jobs and their pay cut. So we're obviously against that. We have also supported always a woman's right to have and raise healthy children, no matter her income, and we demand government programs so all women can do that. We have joined the fights for maternal and child health care, decent housing, free of lead paint now, jobs with livable wages, and nutrition programs so women can have healthy children. Our party has been part of all these movements. The banner we carried in the 1970s said, free, safe, legal abortions, no forced sterilization, raising healthy children, the choice must be ours. Comrade Sue D. worked in a committee against sterilization abuse. Our late comrade Sue Steinman was absolutely pivotal to getting a New York state law requiring pregnancy disability benefits. And now, the fate of this law, and possibly the health of 61 million women in the U.S., rests with an unelected, undemocratic, appointed-for-life justices. The liberal wing, including 3 women justices, however, were very well prepared during the Supreme Court argument with facts, figures, and very incisive questions, and argued very well against the Texas right-wing lawyers. There is something rotten about a system where the state legislature and governor decide on draconian laws when the women of the state oppose them. Thousands packed Texas's state capitol repeatedly and filibustered to oppose this awful law. However, women's groups and clinics say the fate of the law, and thus the fate of women's reproductive health care, rests with one justice, Anthony Kennedy. There are 4 others who are ideologically and politically anti-choice. How is this democratic, especially since the majority here support the right to abortion? So now that the ultra-right Scalia has died, everyone's question in the women's movement is, will the vote be 4-4, which would maintain the Texas law, or will yes, it would. The tie would go back, go back to the way things are. Or will Kennedy line up with the liberals to reach a 5-3 decision? It is absurd and undemocratic that health care for millions of women rests with an appointed-for-life body, which includes 5 male paternalistic conservatives, and that this decision may depend on how one person votes. Unelected Supreme Court justices appointed by presidents and agreed to by millionaire senators make earth-shaking decisions affecting millions of people. The courts also are the most conservative part of the capitalist government. They're not elected. Look at the Supreme Court's record. I'm just going to review some of the most egregious cases. The notorious Dred Scott case upheld slavery. Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896 overturned Reconstruction and upheld Jim Crow segregation laws. The court upheld forced sterilization in 1927 of developmentally disabled people. It upheld the internment of the Japanese and child labor. It has struck down and weakened civil rights and voting rights laws and affirmative action, ruled against a 10-hour workday and LGBTQ rights. The court, remember, decided that Bush was the president in 2000 in Bush v. Gore, and they ruled for corporations in the heinous Citizens United case. The justices let the state opt out of expanding Medicaid for low-income workers and let companies refuse to include contraception in insurance plans. Both of those decisions overturned sections of the Affordable Care Act, which Congress voted for, which was, another a very anti-democratic move. And any gains in the Supreme Court have come about because of mass struggle and movements like the civil rights, women's, labor, and LGBTQ movements. The court carries out the bidding of the super-rich capitalist class, which only trusts its appointees, as Workers' World newspaper recently pointed out in an editorial. The question is now, does the ruling class intend to overturn a major right won by the women's struggle? This moment requires a renewed massive struggle like the one that won the right to choose in 1973 and pushed 5 Republican-appointed judges to vote for it. The Supreme Court, along with the rest of the capitalist class, must be abolished so that women and everyone else can exercise their rights without right-wing ruling class opposition. And we all need socialized medicine in a socialized system. Remember that Cuba maintains women's right to choose along with providing free health care for all. You know, the issues that needed to be explained and the link of the women's struggle for health care and the right to make decisions about our own lives is really part of the overall class struggle in the United States. And the more that the women's struggle ties itself in with the struggle of the workers, the low-wage workers, the oppressed workers, the LGBTQ community, the immigrant workers, absolutely, the Black Lives Matter movement, as much as the women's struggle can tie itself to all these other struggles, the better and the stronger that it will be. It's been a movement that kind of has been led in a certain way, and it's more like sort of off to the side, but I noticed, not to the side, but kind of an entity unto itself. But one thing I noticed that was a big plus was at the rally in front of the Supreme Court on March 2nd. The crowd was multinational, our side, and it outnumbered the right wing about 10-1, and the right wingers were just ridiculous, the things they were saying. They were just rhetoric, like the kind of rhetoric at Trump rallies. But the speakers also were of different ages and different nationalities, and were talking about their own experiences and why they need the legal right to safe, healthy abortions, and tying to some of the other issues that impact on women. Because we, as I kind of tried to explain, we never put just the right to abortion by itself, because we've always had the position that women need to determine their own lives and need to have the laws and the social programs to be able to do that. And we are all, even though we're pro-choice, we're also pro-child. We're for every government program for children that are needed. We're against all cutbacks in daycare and health care and kindergartens and Head Start. We're for all the cutbacks in the arts programs, music programs, and other programs in schools, special ed programs. We're for children having every single thing they need. And one of the reasons that we are socialists is because we know under socialism that children are the gold, that children get everything they need to develop their potential. And you can see that in Cuba. You can see that in the way that socialist movements have been around the world, and revolutionaries, where so much of what people are doing is so that children have futures and potential and have what they need to thrive. So I want to make that point. So I think we played a role years ago in all these different movements, and I really want to make sure that I credit so many comrades in all different aspects of it. And, between anti-sterilization abuse, which was successful in New York, got coercive sterilization off the books. It worked, and it's been taken off the books in other states, although I think it still goes on in the South against oppressed women. We worked for the pro-choice movement. I forgot to mention so much that we also are for free, safe, successful, and available, accessible birth control everywhere for women who need that. And we were very involved. Our comrade Sue Steinman was very involved in winning. She was like one of the key people in the committee that won pregnancy disability in New York State. And her name, she should be attached to that bill, because she really She did everything for it. And also, our comrades have fought for the rights of women workers in every way, everywhere we've been, every scenario, for unions, for higher wages, for union contracts, for women to be in unions, to be unionized. So we've been involved in all different aspects of that struggle. So, I guess on to more struggle, because the ruling class is being ruthless now against hitting back on the rights of workers and oppressed people and immigrants. And we stand with all of those struggles. We stand with all of those movements. And we are for the women and the men who are carrying out those struggles. And we have solidarity with all of them.